Today is January 29th, 2025. This is the City of LaPorte Redevelopment Commission meeting. I'm calling it to order. If we would all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call. I myself, Brian Chalik, is here. J.T. McDermott is here. Damon Gassaway is here. Betsy Parkinson is here. Jenna Francisconi is absent. We have a quorum. Election of officers. I'm going to suggest we keep the officers the same. We'll have to have a motion on that.
I'll make a motion to approve the election of officers.
And that, Mike?
I'll make a motion to approve the election of officers.
Do I have a second?
Second.
That will mean that I am the president, Damon Gassaway would be the vice president, and J.T. McDermott would be the secretary. I have a motion and a second. All in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Solve that problem. Public comment. Do we have any public comment? It's 5:17 p.m. I'm opening it for public comment. Mr. Arnold? Aye. Do you have any public comment? Okay. Public comment is closed at 5:17. Minutes. December 18th, 2024, regular meeting. Everybody have a chance to look at the minutes.
Yep.
Any changes, rule, or additions or deletions?
I'll make a motion to approve the December 18th, 2024 regular meeting minutes.
A motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 4-0.
That was JT and
JT and Betsy.
Betsy.
Claims, January 29th, 2025 claim docket. Everybody have a good chance to look at that. Not a whole lot there. Any questions on it?
I'll make a motion to approve the January 29th, 2025 claim docket.
A motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 4-0. Old business, we have none. New business. Andy Mauser, annual TIF presentation, Baker Tilly. Make it short.
All right.
All yours.
I will do my best to keep it brief,
Okay.
but with that, I want to make sure we, do meet your annual requirement, and then also, provide you with a good, tool as you go through your annual decision making. So this is very similar to what we've done in the past. Did pass out a copy of both the presentation. I'll go through that here this evening, and then also a bound report. Same information. This just has more of the detail. This is really the more presentable format. And then do have a few copies here in case any members of the public would like a copy as well. But I'll just run through this, and feel free certainly to interrupt me with any questions if there's anything I gloss over. Third slide, just want to highlight, going back to 2021, Redevelopment Commission did consolidate all your TIF areas at that point. So you do have a single consolidated economic development area, which gives you much greater flexibility in where your TIF dollars can be spent. But within that economic development area, you have many different allocation areas, and several new ones were added last year. So we continue to track those on an annual basis because they all have their own collections, distributions that you receive individually, and then they all, most importantly, have their own individual lifespans, which I'll highlight here in a little bit. Next slide just shows TIF mechanics. As a TIF area is created, growth occurs and that assessed value is captured. The green box there represents the incremental growth that occurs within a TIF area. For LaPorte's TIF areas, you currently capture just shy of $112 million of assessed value. But it's also important to note, the goal of TIF is to build that assessed value and then get it back to the tax base, which is represented by the orange box on slide 4. you're really just 5 years away, or excuse me, 10 years away from starting to return some of that assessed value back to your tax base. So in 2035, the Eastgate TIF will expire, and at that point, assessed value will start to be returned over the next several decades to the tax base. So TIF's doing what it should do. It's a great tool for you now, but it's also going to be a great boost to the local tax base here in the coming decade. Slide 5, we just highlight terms of allocation areas. As I mentioned, all your allocation areas have individual lifespans that we track. There are different lifespans. You do have a few legacy TIF areas that were set up before 1995. Those have all now had caps put on their lifespans. But you do also have a mix of 30-year TIF areas and then the post-2008 TIF areas, which also have 25-year lifespans. So from here, we just have really a quick summary on each of your TIF areas. I'll start with TIF 1, the central business area, on slide 7. And your central business TIF consists of an original area that was set up in 1990, an expansion area that was set up in 2005, and then it does also have a separate allocation area for the new hospital campus, and then a fourth allocation area for the Flaherty and Collins Banks apartment project in Newport Landing as well. So this area has been very healthy, very consistent. Actual collections for the area, including central business, original expansion, hospital, and Flaherty and Collins allocation areas for 2023 was $1,043,000. For 2024, just shy of $1.1 million. And for 2025 should grow to close to 1.2 million, including the 4 allocation areas. So very consistent, growing, and you've had very healthy collections, about 96% in 2024, which is great for an area that size. Next slide shows the hospital allocation area. So this does include the hospital campus. The hospital does receive enterprise zone deductions through the UEA board. So they currently are not paying into the TIF area, but they do pay a fee, which then comes back. A portion of that fee does come back to the Redevelopment Commission, which has been to the tune of about $400,000 per year. And once those 10-year enterprise zone deductions roll off, the hospital will start to pay back into the TIF. And we currently estimate that here in the next 5 to 6 years, that should be about $1.5 million, $1.6 million per year. Once those are gone. But the hospital allocation area does include some non-hospital parcels as well, as it was connected to the central business TIF. So it currently captures, you'll see for 2025, about $37,000. And again, that's really non-hospital parcels within the hospital allocation area. The fourth area within TIF 1 is the Flaherty and Collins. Again, that's the Banks apartment project up in Newport Landing. For 2024 and 2025, estimating about $357,000 of TIF. The developer on that project did agree to a minimum tax payment. So they've agreed that regardless of what their tax bill is, they will pay a minimum of $440,000 per year. So they did make shortfall payments this year, about $41,000 in both the spring and the fall, to get them to that full $440,000 per the year. So it is right in line with estimates, even though their tax payments have come in a little bit behind. Obviously, they're obligated to make that full payment and have done so. Next slide just is, your central business TIF area is pledged to outstanding debt obligations, but then it is also dollars that you use on an annual basis for ongoing pay-as-you-go projects. So in working with Craig, these are projects that he and the city have identified as future projects to be paid from your central business TIF. So I know, Craig, anything to add on projects for the TIF 1?
No, I consulted with the city engineer on this, on reviewing and revising the list from before and updating that information. So, yeah.
Great. And these, this presentation obviously doesn't obligate you to these projects, but again, just want to make sure we identify projects that, are potentially out there on the horizon that you may continue to accumulate TIF dollars for. So next section talks through your Thomas Rose TIF area, TIF 2. It has 3 different pieces. You actually have one that's a legacy allocation area, one that's a 30-year life allocation area, and then one that's a 25-year life allocation area. So you'll have expirations in 2035, 2038, and 2040. Thomas Rose has been very consistent over the last 3 years, right around 1.5, 1.6 million. But really going back the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen a lot of growth in Thomas Rose. I was looking back in 2019, it actually brought in just under $1 million, actually right around 999,000. And so the last few years, it's grown from 999,000 in 2019 to the 1.6 million you'll see in 2023. So an area that is driving a lot of growth and additional resources for the Redevelopment Commission. And then same thing for Thomas Rose, projects identified on page 13, slide 13. Slide 15 then looks at your Eastgate allocation area. So TIF 3, this is a 30-year allocation area. It will be your first that will expire. It'll expire in January of 2034, so it'll last collect TIF for the January 1, 2034, pay 35 tax year. And it's been very consistent. This one consists of American Signature's facility. Currently brings in about $300,000 per year, and it's been pretty consistent at that level for quite some time. They did make their fall tax payment slightly late, so your spring distribution was $164,000. You did not receive anything in the fall, but they did make a payment of $175,000. And I know Courtney and her office are working to get that advanced to the Redevelopment Commission so that you'll be, right in line with what we expected you to receive for the year. So that one, again, right in line with where we expect once that advance is made. And then on slide 16, just projects for the Eastgate allocation area. Again, you do have flexibility to spend, across TIF areas, really with the single consolidated area, but still identified, projects for each TIF area as well. And then on slide 18, your last TIF area, the town square allocation area has a 30-year life. We've actually seen this one start to increase. It was down as some of the storefronts, I think, had gone vacant a number of years ago, actually bottomed out at about $75,000 a year in 2019, and we've seen it climb back to just shy of $130,000 for 2025. So, definitely a solid increase as started to reutilize some of the vacant storefronts over there. And then again, just projects identified for Town Square. And then on slides 21 and 23, we do include 2 new allocation areas that were created. So last May, you did adopt the declaratory and then finish that process last summer to set up both the 39 North allocation area. We don't anticipate it'll collect for 2025, but starting in 2026 should start to bring in revenues, and as projects develop in 39 North, there's a potential that that could grow pretty quickly. Same thing for Boyd Boulevard. Another new allocation area was set up at the same time. Nothing for 2025, should start to collect in 2026, and then the big project there will be the Microsoft Data Center with the potential to bring in pretty substantial TIF from the building, and then also the pilot payments from them as well. So that's where I think we'll start to see a lot of revenue going forward, in addition to the hospital and then some of your other growth we've seen within your TIF areas. Slides 24 and 25 and 26 highlight your outstanding debt obligations. For each one, we mention the original amounts that were issued, outstanding amounts, final maturity dates, and then what they are paid from. Really, all your debt obligations at this point are payable from a property tax, but then you have the ability to use any of your consolidated TIF. You've never had to use that property tax, and we don't anticipate you ever would. But again, we do track these and kind of the pledged security on all your bonds. I would note, I think the timing on a couple of your projects was very impressive. The 2020 bonds for the Banks project, those were a taxable bond issue, 20 years remaining, and the interest rate on those is 1.1 to 2.6%. I think if we were to do a similar bond today, you'd probably be looking at somewhere in the 5 to 6% range. So pretty incredible interest rate on those, which keeps your payments down. And then the 2021 remediation bonds, those were taxable as well. Those have a flat 2.4%. So not quite as good as the 2020 bonds, but still quite a bit below what current market would be. And then I think probably the most important slide in this presentation is what you'll see on slide 27. This is, what we refer to as your big TIF comparison. So this really pulls together all your different revenues. So you'll see, working from the left side of that page, your central business TIF, I'm currently bringing in just under $800,000 a year, and it will collect all the way through 2039. We include your enterprise zone fees that you receive from the hospital TIF area itself, and you'll see as the enterprise zone fees go away, the hospital TIF does start to generate. Your Thomas Rose TIF, the Flaherty and Collins, the Banks TIF, your Eastgate TIF, and your Town Square TIF. So altogether for 2024, you brought in about $3.2 million. We estimate that for 2025, that should increase to about 3.7. And then going forward, as the hospital starts to come on here in the early 2030s, that could increase to about as much as 4.9 million per year before your areas start to expire. And then we do compare that to your debt obligations. For 2024, total annual debt payments, and that again is on all 5 of those obligations we went through on the last couple slides, but about 1.9 million per year in debt service for 2024. That amount will grow to about 2.2 million this year and then stay at that level going forward. But again, you're bringing in about 3.7 million, so you've got very healthy coverage, which leaves not only protection again against ever having to use that property tax levy, but then also leaves you about $1.5 million for other projects on an ongoing basis. This doesn't include potential future obligations for 39 North projects, but it also doesn't include future revenues as well. So we're hopeful as the data center comes on and other growth within 39 North that these amounts will only continue to increase in the future. And then the very last piece, and then I will be done, trying to keep it as brief as possible. We do, the third part of the annual requirement is you do have to talk or discuss the impacts of your TIF areas. So we've prepared a similar analysis for you in the past. This takes a look at all 3 taxing districts in which you collect TIF, and then all the overlapping taxing units that overlap the TIF areas. So that includes LaPorte Center Township, LaPorte Kankakee 1, with the New Prairie Schools overlap, and then LaPorte Kankakee 2, which does have the LaPorte Community Schools overlap. In 2025, you are scheduled to capture about $112 million of assessed value, and that'll bring in about $3.2 million of TIF. What we do in this analysis is we look at what would occur if you were to give up $10 million of assessed value in LaPorte Center, $5 million of assessed value in LaPorte Kankakee 1, and another $1 million in LaPorte Kankakee 2. And what we found in the analysis is if you were to give up $16 million of assessed value of that $112 million that you capture, you would lose about $465,000 of annual TIF. At the same time, and what you'll see kind of in the scenario 2 on each schedule, that $465,000 wouldn't result in $465,000 of additional revenue to the overlapping units. It would actually be a much smaller number, about $14,000, and of that, about $8,000 would go to the city itself. The other impact would be a reduction in tax rates, but that reduction in tax rates would be fairly minimal, about 3 cents on a $3.37 tax rate. So for Redevelopment Commission's perspective, for the city's perspective, what's most efficient for you, obviously, is to continue to collect the TIF dollars, continue to invest in LaPorte, and then continue to see additional growth in the future. And then, as I mentioned on one of those first slides, the goal of these TIF areas is to build that tax base and then get it back to the tax base when the TIF areas expire. And you're, certainly approaching those dates here in the next, 10 years, as I mentioned. So that's, again, $112 million that will eventually be returned to the overlapping units, which is a strong positive in the near future. So definitely happy to answer any questions, but I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Any questions for Andy? You're free to go. Wherever you gotta go. Okay. Approval of public parking easement agreement, 150 Pine Lake Avenue. Mr. Cook?
Good evening to the Redevelopment Commission. Bert Cook, Executive Director of the LaPorte Economic Advancement Partnership. So we discussed this at length at your last meeting, so I will be brief, although I'm happy to answer questions that you might have. The two agreements, they're the two next items on your agenda, are both in regards to the same area. This is the property 150 Pine Lake Ave, the property that Chipotle will soon be open on. So we discussed previously that as we began that process, and many of you were on the Redevelopment Commission at that time, you'll know that we had a great deal of discussion about what to do with the property and how it would develop and you know, what our ideal situation was. As part of the sale that we agreed to, we wanted to maintain some public right-of-way along the lake there, with the idea that we would eventually put a kayak launch to allow access to the lake, and then potentially longer range, use the Lily Lake Channel that would potentially allow people to maybe launch a kayak and be able to paddle all the way to Stone and Pine Lake and make that connection. And that still is the intended outcome eventually. The developer that built the Chipotle has been a good partner to the city. We've done a couple projects together now, and in the process, we discussed how to maybe best tackle the public infrastructure that would be necessary to make that happen. Of course, we have the kayak launch aspect, which will be a build that we will take on solely from the city's side, but there's parking and lighting and other things that would need to be part of this development in order to be able to use that amenity at some point in the future. And so the agreement that we came up with was they built all of that infrastructure as a part of the development plan. And then we have two agreements in front of you. One is the reimbursement for this infrastructure. The other is the easement for what will be 3 public parking spaces on that site. Again, the developer, when the site plan was approved, he agreed to, I don't remember the exact number, but I think it was in the ballpark of, by code, he needed to put in 35 parking spaces. He put in a number of additional spaces, or a higher number, to accommodate our needs for the public parking within that area. And so we're reimbursing for some of that work. The public parking easement agreement protects us that we have that in place and that those parking spaces will continue to be public into the future. And then the infrastructure reimbursement agreement reimburses him for that work. It's about $40,000 for the lighting and about $60,000 for the parking spaces, the asphalt, the site work that went into that as well. So I'll probably stop there. If you have questions about this, or if Attorney Hagenow wants to add anything, I'll be happy to, we can try and tackle those together.
I think you covered it.
Okay. I'll make a motion for the approval of public parking easement agreement, 150 Pine Lake Avenue.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
A second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0.
I'll make a motion for the approval of infrastructure reimbursement agreement, 150 Pine Lake Avenue.
I have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying yea. Or yeah, say by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Yay. Opposed? Passes 4-0.
Brian, I knew you were just so excited about that.
Yay.
Yeah,
Yay.
get it. I appreciate it.
Done.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Approval of on-call services contract with Carner Blue Consulting. Mr. Phillips.
Yes, so as you recall, we've worked with Carner Blue previously on a couple of different contracts that will be wrapping up basically here very shortly. But we have some loose ends left with regard to some services we need to work with Carner Blue on with regard to both the Boyd Boulevard grant project and the Ready grant project. Rather than have a set contract with a specific dollar amount for those services, just because given the kind of ever-evolving nature of both of those projects, more so the Ready project than the EDA, we'd like to do an on-call services project for basically time and materials based on the rates that are listed in the agreement. This is customary. The city does this with a number of different entities, often through the Board of Works. We don't usually do it through the Board of Work, or through the Redevelopment Commission, but we have in the past. So we'd just like to request approval of a contract for on-call services as needed for, particularly for those two projects or anything else that we deem necessary going forward this year, so that we can continue that work. And hopefully both of those will be generally wrapped up soon, but it's hard to say exactly because of the nature, like I said, with the state of what's going on with the Ready Grant, and there will be a little bit of ongoing work with regard to the EDA. But once we get that finalized, it'll just be kind of a maintenance situation going forward with reporting requirements and that sort of thing. So any other questions you have, I'm happy to answer. The rates there, primarily we would be working with the owner slash our president, strategic advisor, and planner. But there are others that from time to time work with that individual as well, and those rates are shown.
Greg, any idea how long?
Well, with regard to the EDA grant, we are submitting our kind of the largest part of our paperwork as we speak. I'm working with Attorney Hagenow on that, and once that's submitted, we basically have a 2-month waiting period before we hopefully receive funds. Once we receive funds, it's probably going to be mostly an internal process for just reporting requirements going forward and submitting financial paperwork, which we would work with the clerk treasurer. So I don't anticipate there being a lot of involvement on that one. Ready, we have submitted our final applications, but the state has come back a couple of times and asked for additional information, and there's some clarification that was needed on a few things, and so we've used the services of Tina Rogers on that, but hopefully, fingers crossed, we should be getting towards the end of that process as well. So again, that's why we felt like an on-call services contract, which we don't anticipate being very costly, would be the right way to go with this. So I wish I had better answers for that, but it's just been kind of a moving target, especially with the Ready. EDA is more certain, I think, unless something completely different happens in Washington with regard to grants, et cetera. But the Ready Grant, it's just a little bit more of an evolving process. So, yeah.
You feel like we should put a cap on the?
I mean, we could cap it and then come back if we need to again, if you want to set a number on that.
$2.50 an hour, right?
$2.50 an hour, yeah. Like I said, we do have a little bit of work left on the EDA.
Could you cap it, though? You don't know.
Well, if you put a number on it, I would have to come back again and update, that, go above that number if necessary, and explain why.
You do it not to exceed.
You could do it not to exceed. I would say for now, probably $5,000 would be probably reasonable.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then if I need to come back to you again, and I would explain why at that point, that's fine.
Makes sense.
In the motion.
I'll make a motion to approve on-call services contract for Karner Blue Consulting not to exceed $5,000.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor state by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Now the big one. Approval of 2025 engagement letter with Newby, Lewis, Kaminsky, and Jones, and Mr. Hagenow. Would you like to explain this? Not much to explain. Same as last year, isn't it?
It's pretty much the same as last year, that's correct, Mr. President. The number is slightly higher, but not much, so we would propose to provide the same services and hope for the
And you've done a
opportunity.
fabulous job, I might add.
Thank you, sir.
I have a motion.
I'll have a motion for approval of 2025 engagement letter, Newby, Lewis, Kaminsky, and Jones.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor state by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 4-0. You're in for another year, Matt.
Thank you all.
What's this? Appoint members to the Newport Landing Design and Downtown Design Review Committees. That would be you.
Yes, so annually, so both of those bodies, the Newport Landing Design Review Committee and the Downtown Design Review Committee, call for a representative from the Redevelopment Commission to participate as needed. It doesn't happen very often, and in the past, Betsy Cable and
yeah.
Parkinson has been gracious enough to serve in that capacity. I don't think we've expected a lot of you over the years for that, so I just need approval of an appointment so that I can report that back for record keeping and going forward in the event that as those bodies are needed to be called together
I'll
for
appoint
projects.
Betsy again.
Okay.
Betsy, will you accept? Motion.
I'll make a motion to appoint Betsy Parkinson to the Newport Landing Design and Downtown Design Review Committees.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Betsy, you're in. All in favor, state by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Yay.
Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Damon, other business, we don't have any.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Further discussion is none. All in favor, state by saying aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.